I don't know if you're a basketball fan or not, but somewhere in the early 2000s, a movement was born in the NBA. This movement was the practice of teams filling their rosters with the most talented players from around the league to create dream teams. The idea was that if you could put the 5 most talented guys in the league on the court at the same time, you're going to win all your games. As fun as it was for fans to see that much raw talent condensed on the court at one time, the model struggled to do what people thought it would. Often, you ran into everyone on the team wanting to outshine everyone else. These are all franchise players, and they all wanted the glory that came with that. Things like passing the ball became difficult with these teams. The most basic functions that kids learn in kindergarten were marginalized for personal gain. That's not to say that wins didn't come, and in some cases even a couple of championship runs, but even then, those teams would make it all the way there and then die out after a season or two. Compare this to the sports dynasties of the 1990s. Teams with even marginal talent would win championships, and not just 1 or 2, but 3, 4, 5, even 6, year after year of repeated, dependable success. This is how we want our businesses to operate. Most of us aren't looking for 1 to 3 years of blazing glory, only to see our businesses dwindle and disband. The contrast between the dynasty teams of the 90s and the rapid rise and fall teams of the early 2000s teaches us some pretty important things about how to build a team and the power it can have when done correctly. To this point in the Build Better framework, you've learned about the critical importance of strong vision, a solid sales program, smart cash management, and high-performing systems. So often, when we teach these courses, we have builders just like you absolutely foaming at the mouth to implement these powerful tools and strategies. Unfortunately, so often they also have a dazed look in their eyes of overwhelm and exasperation. They realize that there's a lot to do and not enough time or manpower to do it all. Hiring a sales team, a CFO, staff accountants, and managers for strong systems is simply unfathomable for some small business owners. And for those with enough revenue to justify those kinds of hires, there's a prominent sense of fear. We get questions like, how do you find the right person for those seats? And what do they do all day? If I hire all the right people, what am I gonna do? And so many more. Well, we're gonna jump headlong into this and help you feel better about some of those fears. But I wanna start with a personal story. For years, I operated with a successful home building company. As we grew, we kept hiring people simply because we were generating more work than we had people to fill. Pretty soon, our small team of 2 was up to 8. This was great. We had plenty of hands to cover the work. But after a few months, it became abundantly clear that we had a problem on our hands. NAHB offers some very helpful guidelines for how many employees to hire. The rule of thumb they've established over years of gathering data from all types and sizes of construction companies was that for every $1.3 to $1.7 million in revenue, you need 1 employee. Furthermore, they offer the guidance that your payroll should never exceed 4% of your total sales revenue. By the time we had hired our 8th employee, we were earning somewhere around $12 million in sales annually. We were operating in exact accordance with the time-tested and proven industry guidelines. So what was the massive problem we had on our hands? Unfortunately, we didn't know at the time. What we did know is that our warranty projects were a disaster, our schedules were falling apart at the seams, our homeowners were frustrated, our trade partners were dropping like flies, and our developer relationships were struggling. After months of studying and strategizing, we decided that the problem was out of the 8 employees we had, not a single one of them knew exactly what their job was. Sure, they were each vaguely hired to help out in some specific aspect of the company, but as a small business, it was kind of all hands on deck most of the time. So those loosely defined job roles got looser and looser until nobody felt particularly accountable for any one thing. And as the old adage goes, if everyone's accountable, no one's accountable. Fast forward about 3 years. The company had nailed down specific roles and responsibilities. Our profit margins were the best they had ever been. Our warranty program was the pride of our company. External relationships were solid. Our trade partners loved us, and we had raving customer reviews. But we had another problem. Our employees were miserable. They were frustrated. People were struggling to get the information they needed when they needed it. Internal projects were dragging on with little to no progress at times. We thought we had found the holy grail in clearly defining roles for the company. And that did, in fact, do wonders for us. But what we hadn't yet learned was the art of simplicity. In the lessons that follow, we're going to share with you everything we wish someone would have shared with us. These are basic principles that will unleash the true potential of your systems, allow your cash to operate with maximum efficiency, and get your company where you want it to go. To come full circle to our NBA analogy, there are a few lessons we'll focus on in the modules that follow. What made the dynasty teams so great for so long, and what made the rise and fall teams so unstable in the early 2000s? Let's jump in and see if we can figure that out. But first, we like to remind you as often as we can that the real power of Build Better courses comes in the application of the content. So before you move on to the next course, get the most out of this one by completing the following action items. Number 1, do the math. Figure out how many employees you have for every $1.3 to $1.7 million in revenue. Remember, falling in line with the tried and proven NAHB standards would put you at 1. Number 2, do some more math. What percentage of your total sales revenue is dedicated to payroll? And yes, this should include owner distributions. Again, if you're sticking to proven methods for a healthy company, this should land right around 4. Number 3, be brave and ask a few people in your organization if they know exactly what's expected of them in the next 90 days. You might be surprised what you hear.